Hey y'all, it's Robin. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am filming some winter reading recommendations. So every season, I personally love to build a seasonal TBR just filled with books that I think are good for the season or that are coming out that season. And as much as I am not a mood reader, I like to read off lists. I do like to read seasonally. So I have a couple of books set aside that I think are perfect for winter. They either have like super wintry settings, cold atmosphere. Some of these are romances, some are mystery thrillers, some are fantasy, but all of them have a really, really good winter settings, winter vibes. They're just perfect for this time of year. So I am going to organize this by genre, and they kind of go from the most non-romance heavy to the most romance heavy. So that's kind of how I've organized this. I'm going to start with the mystery thriller and end with a super sexy romance. So we're going to hit a bunch of stuff in between those two spectrums. So the first book on this list is An Unwanted Guest by Sherry Lapina. This is obviously a very snowy book, so it is perfect for winter. This is just a really fun locked room mystery. In this book, we are following a bunch of people who are traveling to this mountain lodge, and on their way to this lodge, there is this massive snowstorm. And so once everybody arrives at the lodge, they are all stuck at the lodge. And when somebody turns up dead, they all kind of turn against each other and they have to figure out, is it an accident or who is doing the killing? And it's just a really, really fun, classic-esque locked door mystery. I loved the snowy vibes of this. If you were into One by One by Ruth Ware or The Hunting Party by Lucy Foley or anything like that, and you haven't given this one a read, I definitely recommend it. This one I actually preferred over those other two because the twist in here was fantastic. I really like Sherry Lapina's writing. She doesn't necessarily do anything like new and wild and crazy in this book, but it is just really well crafted, really well written, and it is perfect for the snowy months. The next book on this list is a book that I gave 3 stars. It wasn't my absolute favorite book, but I still really associate this book with the winter months because of its setting and vibe and everything like that. And that is The Wolf and the Woodsman by Ava Reid. While I personally gave this one 3 stars, this book is really, really well loved. And for good reason. This book is beautifully written. It has a great setting. It has a really vivid like world and everything like that. I personally just didn't connect to the romance that was in here, and the romance element is a big portion. But I know I am kind of in the minority on that one. I have read lots of reviews that absolutely adored the romance in here, which is why I'm still putting it on this recommendation list. Because even though this wasn't a perfect book for me, I think there is a very large group of people that this book will be perfect for. This book follows Hungarian mythology and Jewish folklore, and we are following a pagan girl who doesn't have any powers, but she lives in this like society of people who every year one of the girls is sacrificed to the woodsman. Because she doesn't have any power, she isn't very well liked by her group. And so this year she is sacrificed to the woodsman. But when she is like on her way to the capital with these woodsmen, the woodsmen are attacked and all but one of them are killed off. And her and the last remaining woodsmen have to band together and try and save themselves as well as possibly the whole kingdom. There is a lot of snowy scenes in here. They kind of have to travel around for a little while and they go up north. There is a scene on like an icy lake and there's a lot of snow and things like that. And if you are really into mythology and folklore, I really do recommend this one. The next fantasy on here is one of my favorite series of all time, and that is the Winter Night series by Catherine Arden. I absolutely adore Catherine Arden's books, and this series is one of the most beautifully written series I've ever read. Obviously, again, this is very, very snowy. This book is based on Russian mythology and folklore. And in this book, we are following a slightly fantastical version of Russia. All of the old gods and stuff are real in this world. And so we're following a main character who at the beginning of this book is very young. And throughout this first book, you watch her grow up, and then she is an adult in the subsequent books. In this first book, you are following her as a young girl, and she can see the old gods. No one else can see the old gods, and the old gods are starting to die off. And because they are disappearing, an evil force in the woods might be getting loose. As winter approaches, dark things start to happen, and our young heroine might be the only one who can save them. Along the way, you are kind of like learning more about her family. Her father gets remarried to this woman who can also see old gods, but she thinks they are demons. And so she kind of goes head to head with her like new stepmother. There is a winter god in here who is my favorite. This has such a beautiful setting. The world in here is like its own character. This is told in multi POV, so you're kind of hopping back and forth through all these different points of view. It is just, I absolutely adore this book. This first book is not everyone's favorite, but I will say the series gets better and better with each book. And I personally loved this book. It has a bit of a slow start because you are following the heroine as she's growing up. But once the story gets going, it is impeccable. I love this series. And Catherine Arden just does such a good job with the myth and folklore elements. Switching genres, so that one was historical. We are going to go straight into some more historical books. And the next series I want to recommend is the Veronica Speedwell series by Deanna Raybourn. I feel like I recommend this series for every season because it's just, it's so good. I want to recommend it for everybody. This first book, A Curious Beginning, I think technically takes place in spring, if I'm not mistaken, spring or summer. I believe that the third book is technically set in winter, but the series as a whole is just so heartwarming. There's something about Victorian London that feels very like cold to me. So I feel like the series just works really well for winter. In this series, you are following Veronica, who is a scientist. She is a butterfly scientist. There is a word for it, but I'm going to mispronounce it, so we're going to stick with butterfly scientist. In this first book, she is going to a funeral for one of the women that helped raise her. And when she is back at the house, somebody breaks into the house and she is nearly abducted. And she is able to escape the abduction, but then she's kind of like wrapped up into this like mystery of who is after her. And then she finds a friend of hers has been killed. And so she is pulled into this mystery with this person who was also friends with the guy that was killed. And the two of them have to reluctantly team up to try and solve the mystery. And there is a really, really slow burn romance throughout this series. It's historical. Each book has its own mystery in it. So you have a completely like wrapped up plot in each book, which is really nice. But there are threads that like linger throughout the whole series, but not the mystery elements. It's more like the relationships and stuff are like the connecting thing throughout the books. The relationship between Veronica and Stoker is so good. Their banter and wit and charm and slow burn romance is so good. So if you want a good historical romance mystery to get lost in winter, I highly recommend this series. And then one more historical, I'm going to recommend Bringing Down the Duke by Evie Dunmore. The reason I am recommending this one is because this one is actually set during winter. So in this book, we are following a heroine who is one of the first female students at Oxford. While she is there, she is on a scholarship. In order to get that scholarship, she has to be a part of the suffragette movement. And she is tasked with trying to win the favor of this really like cold duke. The two of them end up having this kind of like meet cute situation, and she can't stand him because he seems so icy and cold. He wants nothing to do with the suffragettes. He just kind of wants to be left alone. The two of them end up having this really great romance. This is not only set in the dead of winter, but there is actually like a winter ball in here. So this has tons of snowy vibes, as well as a really cold-hearted, seemingly icy hero. And so this one just gives me all of the winter vibes, and I really liked this romance. Switching gears to contemporary, the next book I want to recommend is the only book that I actually don't own physically, and that is the Simple Wild series by K.A. Tucker. This series is set in Alaska. We're following a heroine who is from Canada, and she is from a big city in Canada. I can't remember if it's like Toronto or Vancouver or where it was. She lives with her mother and her stepfather. And she has always had this like strained relationship with her father, who was a bush pilot in Alaska. They've never really like lived together or anything like that. Her mother left him when she was a very small child, but she receives a call saying that her father is very sick. She should come to Alaska and get to know him as as best as she can. And so she decides that she is going to leave Canada and go to Alaska to spend some time with her father. While she is in Alaska, she meets another bush pilot, and the two of them have this really intense enemies to lovers romance. This whole book is obviously very snowy. It is set in Alaska. And I believe the start of this book takes place in fall and like goes into winter. And there is a sequel as well as a novella, and the sequel is set and the novella are both set in winter, I believe. This book really explores family and grief. There is trigger warnings for cancer as well as death of a loved one. The romance in here is really big on the enemies to lovers. The two of them have a terrible first impression, and they are very much like opposites. So they do kind of like have a lot of snark back and forth, but their romance is so cute. And I really enjoy this series. There is a spin-off coming in early next year following a side character that we get from these first couple of books. So I'm really excited to get back to this world, and I highly recommend this if you're looking for a cute contemporary romance. The last contemporary is 8 Perfect Hours by Leah Lewis. I have been seeing this book on a lot of like holiday TBRs, and I just want to put it out there that this is not a Christmas story. This cover very much so looks like it would be a holiday romance, but this book takes place in March. So don't let this cover fool you. This book opens up with a freak snowstorm in March. It is set in the UK. Our main characters are traveling on the highway, and there is this freak snowstorm that shuts down the highway, and they are stuck there for 8 hours. They are parked next to each other, and so they end up talking to each other and spending the entire night together. Then they go their separate ways, but they keep running into each other over and over again, and slowly they form a friendship and a bond, and eventually a romance. I really, really enjoyed this book. This is not what I would consider a romance story. It is a contemporary novel. You are following more the heroine's personal journey, and it's really an exploration of her trying to figure out what she wants next and out of her life. But along the way, there is a really, really sweet romance in here. So if you're looking for a cute contemporary story with some snowy vibes and a small romance subplot, I really, really recommend this one. Leah Lewis is such a great author, and I cannot wait to find more books from her. The next book I want to recommend is Written in the Stars by Alexandra Bellafleur, and this book actually does take place over the holidays. This is a Pride and Prejudice retelling. It is a sapphic romance. This is another opposites attract, enemies to lovers romance. And so in here, we are following an astrologer who is kind of this like free spirit, and Darcy is an actuary who is very uptight and closed off. And the two of them end up getting set up on a blind date, and it goes awful. Elle is actually working with Darcy's brother, and the two of them, in order to get the brother off of their back, they decide to fake date. Along the way, they fall in love. This takes place, like I said, over the holidays, and it actually ends at a New Year's Eve party. So this is the perfect time of year to pick this up. And then the last book I want to recommend is Credence by Penelope Douglas. I am going to preface this by saying that this is not going to work for everyone. This is a pretty taboo, chunky, steamy romance. So this book opens up with our heroine, who I believe she's 17 at the beginning of this book. And right at the beginning of the book, her negligent parents end up dying, and she has to go and stay with her step-uncle. So she moves to this really, really remote cabin in the mountains, and she is staying with a step-uncle and his 2 sons. They are not related. They're not related at all. This book is kind of a romance of her with all 3 of the guys while they are snowed in at this remote cabin in the mountains. Throughout this book, you are slowly figuring out who her happily ever after is going to be with. Is it one of the 2 sons? Is it the uncle? Who knows? This book is very taboo. It is very sexy. There's a lot of steam in this book. But I had such a good time with this book. This was one of my favorite books of, I think, 2020, if I'm not mistaken. This is actually my favorite Penelope Douglas, which I know is an unpopular opinion. I know everyone loves Birthday Girl and Punk 57. I highly recommend this one if it sounds like something you can handle. If you like taboo, steamy romances that kind of push the edge, Penelope Douglas definitely pushed it a little with this book, and I really, really enjoyed it. All right, so that is it for my 10 winter reading recommendations. Let me know if you have read any of these. Let me know if you have any recommendations that are great for winter. I am planning to do a separate video with holiday specific recommendations. I don't know in what order I am posting these videos. So if I've already done that, I will link that video up in the cards or down in the description box. If I haven't done it yet, keep your eyes peeled for some holiday reading recommendations, and I will catch you all in my next video. Bye.